Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 9th edition of WASBO's Beyond the Pail webinar. We hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining us this morning. We do these webinars about, once every 8 weeks or so, every other month, and they are intended to help all of our facility directors and facility staff around the state by highlighting best practices and talking about what works and what's new and share some ideas. So that's what we're all about. And I'm Mike Berry, Executive Director of WASBO. And since I was a business manager, I don't really know much about this, which is why we have a couple of experts who have a couple of more experts. We have a full panel today. So Beyond the Pale co-hosts, we are lucky to have them. First, Joe Ledvina from Crosse. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. Just want to welcome everybody today as I grab a drink.
That's you
Joe, put the Cubs mug down.
Did you have a good Sunday, Joe?
The
It was
Bears.
a good Sunday.
Okay.
Yes, very good.
Okay. Well, it looks like you're going to have a lot of free time, this Sunday. So, anyway, our other co-host, the Chief Operations Officer from Muskego-Norway, Jeremiah Johnson. Hey, Jeremiah, how's it going?
Good morning, Wisconsin. So
Oh,
things aren't as hot over here for a Green Bay fan, but it's all good.
This is great. We got competing mugs this morning. I'm getting a kick out of this. Well, hey, you guys have got a great topic this morning on sustainability, and there are a lot of different aspects to it. So I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute. Just a reminder to everybody who's participating this morning, please feel free to use the chat and kind of comment along with us. And if we can sneak one of your questions in along the way, we will certainly try to do that. We're scheduled to go for an hour with a hard stop at an hour, and we might be a little short of that if we're efficient. And again, thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm excited to talk about this topic because I'm gonna do a little learning myself. I feel like as far as sustainability goes, we're like average and we're just kind of keep up with the trends, but we haven't done anything crazy like solar or geothermal. We haven't been active in the grant writing or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to learning from some of our panelists here today. My experience in energy management was a little more than a decade ago. We had an in-house like management program where we shared duties and doing audits and having everybody got a little slice of the pie to make sure that things were turned off and managed properly. And we saved a good deal of money through that. But Joe, I understand that you and your team, you guys actually have like on-site energy manager full time, and just wonder what that was like.
Yeah. So thank you, Jeremiah, for that introduction, because I want to follow that. I don't feel like I'm an expert in sustainability at all. But that's what continuing education is, right? You're just constantly learning. And I think that's where we are in La Crosse. We're evolving as we look at this whole idea of sustainability. We hired an energy manager in 2003. And so we've been doing some things since then. It's been a great learning experience. In fact, Jeff Elson is on board here today. He's our third energy manager that we've had in that time frame. So we feel very fortunate in that area. But we've done some unique things this last year that's really helped us along the way. One of the things that we did is we started a sustainability committee last January. And the whole focus of that committee was to come up with a climate action plan. And so we started that this last year. We're taking that forward to the board in January 27th. We'll have a draft of that plan, about a 40-page document that we've been working on. So we're still kind of evolving, learning on all of those things. We do have quite a bit of solar in La Crosse, and Jeff can share some of those stories. We also have geothermal that we put in a building in 2014 that's worked really well for us. So, but by no means are we an expert, but we have a little bit of experience in that area, and hopefully we'll share some of that with you today.
Yeah, and we got Jeff online, and I guess from my perspective, if I got the opportunity to hire an energy manager, I'd be thinking to myself, like, what is that person doing all day? So Jeff, would you mind just sharing like what's a day in your world like? Like what are you doing from by the
Yeah,
time you get into
absolutely,
the
What are you
Jeremiah.
doing all day, Jeff?
Well, thank you, Jeremiah. Yeah, I'm Jeff Elson from the School District of La Crosse, Transportation Energy Manager. You know, the thing that every day, what we're constantly looking at is making sure that each school is, the utility cost is down. We deal with focus on energy a lot, and I'll go more into that. But our biggest thing is to make sure that we have all of our staff buy in on it. So we're constantly doing energy audits and making sure that if our staff isn't, they forgot something, we make sure to remind them and make sure that they understand that anytime we can save any money, it just goes towards the student's education where we can put it there.
Did you have a background before you got into this in like energy management?
You know, I didn't have a background in energy management, but I did. I used to work for a sign company. And so then I was in charge of making sure our signs were UL'd. And so I was able to go to some classes and learn how to, the logistics of it works. And the other thing is the big thing is realizing you got to stay ahead of the times. Like for instance, there's newer LEDs out there. All of this stuff is saving us energy. And we're constantly working with our focus on energy. A client that helps us out to make sure that we keep moving and staying rotating our funds that come in so we can help put in newer lighting into our buildings or solar.
Jeremiah, every one of our energy managers that we've had since 2003 grew through the ranks. In other words, they were a custodian, then they were a building engineer. And so we found that that's really the best route to go. They see everything. You know that people who are custodians, our best employees, they see what's going out there. They have relationships with staff. And so all of them have been homegrown in that area.
I'd like to also welcome Dave Elliott from Menasha, and you guys got a really awesome building that you guys recently brought online. So how do you guys work your energy management?
Well, right now it's all pretty much me and my facility engineers. We have the typical tools like you were talking about earlier, Jeremy. We have We Energies. We have metered energy where we're lucky enough working with our utilities that we can monitor our building in 15-minute intervals. So we task our facility engineers to watch that closely and look for the peaks of the days, and then we start targeting that area because that's the big bang for the buck right there.
And you guys both have in La Crosse and Menasha within your school districts some big buildings, some small buildings, some new buildings, some 60s buildings, some really old buildings, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, from 27 up. So.
Yeah.
From oh my gosh, from that's yeah. Wow. How
We're
does
sitting in a building right now, Jeff and I, that was built originally in 1899 and had a fire and rebuilt in 1921 over the same foundation. So,
Wow.
So kind of brings us to like getting buy-in from staff. And so my experience early on in energy management back in like 08, 09 was we had there was a group that came through the state called Energy Education, and I think a lot of our districts bought into the protocols to saving money. And part of that was you get these little pads of like notices, so they were called like oops slips or looks good. And so you'd walk through each classroom, and if somebody left like a monitor, a TV, or a printer on, you'd give them a oops slip. And early on, that wasn't necessarily received all that great, and we did make strides and save money, but wasn't the best for culture, I'd say. But yeah, I'm just curious how you guys are getting buy-in from your staff to help with this.
I would speak from the school district of La Crosse. I just recently did an energy audit and did the same thing, Jeremiah, with slips. And the funny thing is we're seeing our staff actually realizing like, oh my gosh, I left that on. Thank you for letting me know. Because our holiday break, it was so long, we make sure fridges are unplugged. One thing we don't think of is like we have washing machines in our schools, making sure that water shut off so a line doesn't break or something. So there's so many different things. And just recently, one of our schools emailed me and said, you know what, our staff is totally all for this because you said there was a couple fridges that were left on, but I never told anybody who it was, and there was multiple people that came up that thought they were the guilty party. And everybody wants to make sure it works. So I went to that school and I went to those teachers and I said, thank you for keeping your eyes, show appreciation that this is so important. And I believe I see the buy-in coming in from our staff. So
I would just add to that, one of the things Jeff did is send an email then out to the principal and staff, and he approached it from a positive approach, all the great things that they did. And so I think that's another way of what he's talking about.
Did something,
We do the same. We do the same here in Menashes. We email and communicate that way and try to show them what it does to the budget, the savings that it impacts savings across the board, and that cost can come back to doing things for teachers, learning. So.
nice. I had to kind of twist that whole oops slip into something positive. So I kind of took every class and put it on a spreadsheet. And for the teachers that never got one throughout the year, I created an Energy Star Staff Member Award. And I actually had the mayor sign it and the superintendent. And then I would do a little presentation at a staff luncheon. And there was a teacher that till this day, we haven't done this in years, but we still call her Lights Out Flora. She won it like 4 years in a row. So
Well, Jeremiah, I really love that approach. I shared
Yeah.
with you earlier when we first hired an energy manager, they quickly came up with the name Energy Czar, right? And so anything we can do to be positive and take that a positive approach. I love your idea. We haven't incorporated that, but that's a great idea.
I agree.
we also at the school level for the head custodians, we did the average costed per square foot per month to operate the building, and we passed around an Energy Star belt. It was like a WWE belt. And so each month at a head custodian meeting, it'd get passed along to somebody else as far as like who had the most efficiently run facility.
That's great.
Oh yeah, somebody actually retired and took that belt home. You were talking about it yesterday at a meeting, like what happened to the belt? And sure enough, Frank like left with it. So
An elementary school in Madison that had an award, the Golden Plunger Award, for whichever classroom kept their bathroom cleanest. And man, those kids, when they would announce that over the PA that, room 219, Mr. Jones' classroom won the award, you could hear the cheers from all the way down in the principal's office. The kids would go, you got to bring a little element of fun to it. That's
Yes.
the
So when it comes to data tracking, there's a lot of softwares out there that help. I found with energy education back in the day, like 2013, I was doing like a lot of manual entry for every single account we had, the demand, all that stuff, and it was all manual entry. Then I come to find that We Energies and Constellation, who we purchase gas from, have their own dashboards where you could just look at month to month, and there was no data entry. So that's kind of where I've leaned on to look for any gaps or things like that. Like what are you guys doing for data tracking?
At La Crosse, we use eGauge, and each school is pulled up. It shows you, like you say, by the half hour to where our schools are using. For instance, came through one of our schools, and I was wondering why at 9 o'clock was the spike so huge at 9 o'clock, because we should have amped up our boilers and everything slowly, before 9 o'clock, before the high demand. Well, it turns out the cook was running 2 ovens and steamers, and we only needed to run one. And so we dropped it significantly to help that school save energy that way. So
Yeah, we're doing that in Menasha all the time. It's such a great tool to go after them peaks, and to find that weird spike of the day, and kind of fun to just to go out and track it down. So
Yeah.
And there's a lot of money involved in that.
there is a ton of it. So,
I would draw a comparison to if you want to buy a flight from Wisconsin down to Florida, the price in July is pretty low. The price in February or early spring break is incredibly high, right? And that's a form of a peak charge, right? Peak demand charge. And it's no different with energy. If you're buying energy at a peak time, or if you're calling for more energy than you normally do, you're going to pay for it.
I like to think of it
Yeah.
as kind of a Ponzi scheme a little bit because the energy companies always win in that like you set a peak on the year that you don't get to erase until the next year. So you hope not to be at that peak. And it's a peak of 15 minutes during any time during the year where everything is cooking in your school. And then you get the on peak demand for the month. And all of your billing, all of everything is related to whatever that peak was, because the utility company says we have to assume you're going to want to use that amount of energy all the time. So it's a little bit, it's almost 50% of the bill when you look at it.
Yeah, right. One of the things, if you look at our budgets, right, those are our largest line items in our budget is our utilities. And so we look at it as if we can track that, we can make minor changes, we can know when things aren't right. It's an indicator sometimes that we have equipment failure. If we're monitoring that, that's where we can have our biggest impact on budgets.
Right.
So, next topic was efficiencies to talk about. Let's kick it off with we knew we had the old T8 fluorescent ballast, so we had a concerted effort to get into the LED world. So I think we're 100% LED at this time. I'll say one caveat that has nothing to do with anything, but we did at one school install a faulty a bulb that wasn't compatible with what we had. Didn't know it at the time, and we had a massive fire. So always being careful about what you're putting in and what you're doing as you're making those conversions. I actually just heard last week there was a fire in Hartford too in a light fixture. So, but we've seen substantial savings. I believe it was about 20% per school to be able to save. And then when we expanded one of our schools, we didn't have to do an operating referendum because we just refilled that gap back in. What are some other efficiencies that you guys are finding?
Yeah, and we're not fortunate enough to be all LED yet in all of our facilities. We're going toward that direction. And I'll let Jeff talk to it a little bit. But one of the things we're doing is any rebates we get for any efficiency projects, we reinvest that. That goes into a separate account and it stays in that account. And we're reinvesting those projects, and then they create more rebates. And then we invest again in those. And it's really been a way of helping us not, get into our operational budget or having to do some of those things through capital improvements, because I know some of those rebates are really quite large, and we've been able to do quite a few projects on that. And I'll let Jeff talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, don't let your business manager steal those refunds. You better
Well,
shut your eye on that.
a good point, but you know what? They bought into it too. So, Patty, everybody knows we set up this special account just for rebates. And so I think it's one way of doing some really, you can do some really nice upgrades to a lot of things. We've used it for new boilers. We've used it for lighting. We've used it for just about anything you can imagine as it relates to energy.
That's great.
Yeah, just
I like to add to that, going back to what Jeff said, when it comes to focus on energy, if you're not getting really close with your focus on energy rep, you should, and apply for every single rebate you can. Because again, over the last decade, we've brought in $275,000 in rebates from focus from projects. And we're lucky enough to be all LED now. There may be one or two bulbs floating out there that we missed in some 1927 crevice somewheres, but for us, we're 99.9% LED. And over the last decade, we've replaced all of our old Kiwani boilers, steam boilers, and such with the high efficiency condensing boilers. So, and it's made a huge impact on the energy budgets.
Other thing on lighting I would highlight is that make sure you don't go too dim. There's like something called a luxometer that can share like if it's kicking out the amount of foot candles that you're going to need. We did a whole parking lot with a light that we thought would work, and it was our high school, unfortunately. We went with 5 years, but it was just so dark. We were always getting complaints. It's too dark. And then we had the reverse happen when we we upped it to a higher lighting. Then all the neighbors complained that it looked like Walmart over here. It's still LED, but it's like a no win in that situation.
Yeah, and just to tail off of Jeremiah's a little bit too, we've done a lot of parking lots because all your parking lots are either metal halides or high pressure sodium bulbs with ballast, and the draw on those things are huge. The other thing is that we have started doing our auditoriums Those have flood lamps in them. They're just, and now putting LED in, we're seeing a huge savings in that area too.
So hoping we can lean on our business managers here. We have Brian Adesso from Menasha and Mike, of course, too, but there's ways that you can take that metering that we were talking about earlier, the dent meters where you can see your 15-minute of demand charge, and then you can really see your whole school as far as how much does it take to operate this gym when you isolate that 15 minutes and you run the gym or you run your kitchen. How is it that you can use that data to levy, for taxes or anything like that? I'm way out of my wheelhouse here, but thought you guys could speak to it.
Brian, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So right now we're in the process of exploring it and implementing it for food service. The Wisconsin DPI does have pretty strict guidelines around this because they want to make sure that electricity used is only for food service, not for shared use. So you kind of have to have metering on there. You have to have a log, and then you'll also have to have your utility certify that it is correct. There are companies out there that try to sell this service to you. Everyone's capable of doing it themselves. A lot of us have the systems already in place to do this metering. So you should look into that. The community service fund, and with all this, I would just caution people, don't try to continually push things off. Like that's where districts sometimes get into a little bit of trouble. They want to try to, get things off into other funds. And then, we have like a whole cafeteria that's over in the community service fund. That's maybe only used 10% of the time for community service. So just make sure that you can fully allocate all those costs to those funds, and that's what it's really going towards. So I mean, the big one here is the food service. I'm not sure if I would think around with the community service unless you have some kind of facility that's used greatly by the outside people.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let me make sure I hit that again, just because we've got a lot of folks on the call who are not necessarily business office people or budget gurus like you, Brian. But yeah, sometimes you'll see the business office try to reach a little bit, like
Brian, I have a question for you, Brian, if I could. Do you do any of that as it relates to billing for building use? So do you
described.
narrow that down? So we do building use, but we don't, in our building use agreements, we don't technically bill for utility use per se. We have fees for, like we all have fees per square foot and per usage there, but we don't break it down into utility costs. I mean, we take that into account when we're setting the overall fee.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mike was talking too slow, so Google was like, nope.
Mike talking slow, I don't see those two things going together.
All right, jumping into lighting controls. I'm fortunate that we have most of our buildings integrated into our building automation software. We can set schedules on, off. Sometimes it gets wonked and you'll come in the middle of the night and a building's lit up like Christmas, but that's been helpful to us. Any other strategies that you guys have used?
No, we don't use, we have not put that into our energy management system, so I'd like to hear some success stories as it relates to that.
We have one of our elementaries on automated logic lighting controls, where we can schedule throughout the building between grade shifts and such. We can turn lights on and off. We've been doing that now for about 4 years in the building, and it's worked pretty good. We do have our field house on automated logic lighting controls, so we can schedule the use there. So.
What about motion sensors? Does anybody have motion sensors in their classrooms? Have you done that? Has it been successful?
We have aux sensors in just about every one of our classrooms.
Yeah.
We've
done that too.
Every time some piece of artwork falls off the wall in a classroom.
Yeah.
Gotta use good tape.
Yeah.
We just opened a building and unfortunately the sensitivity was like too light or something, and the teachers were complaining that the lights are just going off in the middle of the day, so always making sure that that's commissioned right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that we did that when we built a school in 2014. The lights sense the natural light coming in and they adjust to that. But you're right, that can cause some issues as well.
I think HVAC is a big one as far as finding efficiencies and making sure everything's dialed in correctly and operating. Um, any special strategies, especially for the energy managers on the call? Like what are you guys doing for making sure this stays dialed in?
I would say for La Crosse, we make sure that all of our engineers at all of our schools are making sure that they are definitely trained very well on our, HVAC system. We use DeZiegel, which is complete controls. And when we're not occupied, we are unoccupied, which then means our, unoccupied temperature is 55 degrees. As soon as someone comes in, then we go up to a set point that we do 68 to 72. It's important, like for instance, again, I'll go back to our holiday. When we don't have staff in the building, those buildings need to be amped down, and we make sure that that's done. We constantly, even I have controls of all the buildings. I check them all the time to make sure that they're set right and correct. So it again has saved a lot in utility cost.
One of the things that on top of that is the optimal start of your equipment. As it's coming online in the morning, we make sure that there's no two pieces of equipment starting at the same time. And that's a huge saving. Again, going back to that kind of peak component of it. So
Yeah.
we use automated logic, which we found phenomenal. We went from a system when I first got here that you had to be an Apollo 11 engineer to change the thermostat settings. X's, O's, 1, 2s, and 3s. And it's like, wow, let's get rid of this. Because our facility engineers couldn't even easily manage the building. So we got rid of all pneumatic, that old system, and brought in digital controls and automated logic. And what a world of difference that brought to the district. So
One example I'd like to give, and it's not really sustainability, but one of the things we've done with our energy management systems is we have an emergency shutoff for each one. So let's say that there's a chemical spill next door, or we have railroad tracks that go by our building. If there is an accident, we needed to shut down our HVAC system in a hurry. I know it's not really related to sustainability, but we were able to program it so we have a one button, we can push that off. And I think there's a lot of capabilities in those energy management systems. So that's just one example of a special procedure that you can identify. And you can pre-identify also non-school days. And so make it easier for your end user. So when we have a non-school day, you can just go put in that non-school day schedule. Just some thoughts to think about as you're programming your energy management system.
One thing we've done to push the envelope, and this may be a no-no, but it is what it is. But in the fall and spring, when we have Phy Ed classes that are outside for the bulk of the day, we'll shut down a gym and, we'll talk to the teacher about it, make sure we know what their schedule is. And now we have an indoor practice facility that's enormous. So we've noticed over the lunch hour for a couple hours, it's fairly unoccupied. So we'll shut it down for a couple hours, which is during that peak demand we discussed earlier, which has helped hopefully achieve some savings, not to have that pumping. In a lot of those areas, they prefer it to be a little cooler and more natural. But one word of caution is we get a little aggressive over the summer sometimes, and we don't condition those spaces. And we can end up with either mold, which has happened, or cupping in your wood floors. So it's important to always strike that balance of keeping things conditioned, but setting back to save when you can.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've run into mold problems too. And ideally, we don't have as many off time besides summer anymore, but ideally it's if you can schedule doing your floors at different times of year would be ideal. It helps you out so you don't have to run those things, but we've run into those same issues. So it's really important that you watch what you're doing here and control humidity because it does make a difference in indoor air quality.
Oh gosh, Joe, we've had any number of school districts where they did the carpets in August, left a half a gallon of water on each carpet, then closed the door and turned off the HVAC. 3 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they got a Petri dish going on there. So that's happened so many times. Don't
I
do
took I took my son to first year of college in 2010, took him to the university and got him into his dorm room. We were the first ones there. Is at Winona State actually. Went into his room and it was just full of mold.
oh,
And and they let us in and they were in a panic mode. And I'm like, well, you don't have to panic. This is what you need to do. But we couldn't move in that day because of that. So you're exactly right. They become petri dishes.
yeah. Well, I think we just lost Winona State as a sponsor of our.
We moved in, a week later and everything was fine, but yes,
Good save.
yeah.
Kind of stoked to talk about this next topic, solar. I have been reluctant to get into it. I call consultants, I try to learn a little bit. I've even been advised by consultants that it's not a great thing right now in Wisconsin because of the recapture amounts. Like I guess, and I'm totally gonna butcher this, so someone's gonna correct me, but in Illinois, you can recapture a lot more of the energy that solar captures for you. And in Wisconsin, there's a rule of like 30% or something like that. So always shied away from it. I want to get into it, especially when I put a new roof on. I'm like, oh, it's a great opportunity to consider this. So love to hear more from you guys.
Yeah, I'd like to share a story and we're fortunate in La Crosse. There's an organization called SOLS. And what SOLS stands for is Solar on La Crosse Schools. So they came to us probably, and I lose track of time, probably about 7, 8 years ago, and came into our office and said, hey, we want to help you put solar on your schools. I'm thinking, oh yeah, right. You're going to be able to raise money to do that. We formed a relationship with this group. And from that relationship, and they had donors and they raised. And so I'll let Jeff talk about the specific projects. But the first one, we have solar on 4 or 5 of our schools. We're in the process of putting it on another school. But you're right. I was looking years ago, I was looking at the paybacks for that, and it just didn't pay in Wisconsin. Give you an example, went to Rochester, Minnesota. What I wanted to do is heat our swimming pool with solar. Thought we could save a lot of money, and we could, but the payback just wasn't there because of the limitations that we had in the state of Wisconsin, which makes you wonder. But we've been able to do quite a bit of solar and we've incorporated education with that. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about some of those projects, but it's worked out really well for us. But I have to tell you, the payback's zero, right? Because they fundraised for us. But there's some wonderful rebates in there. We keep those rebates and we reinvest them again into some of the solar projects. So I'll let Jeff talk a little bit about that and then let others talk.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Yeah, our first school that we did solar on was Hamilton Elementary. We did 219 solar panels on it. It's about 84 kilowatts. We do, as Joe mentioned earlier, we do a monitor that educates the kids along with the staff on each day how much solar is saving, that is consumed, to be able to save on energy costs for that building. We do training classes. Again, with SOLS, they have helped us be able to come up with the money to be able to fund it and be able to do 4 schools. And we're actually going to do our 5th school. And we're looking forward to that. And that'll be our biggest array on our schools. It's nice because when they come out to site, they give you as big array as they think they can put on the roof, but it has to be engineered because of snow load and everything else to make sure the roof can handle it. Jeremiah mentioned about when you do a new roof, it is important. Joe and I discuss, every time we do solar, to make sure it's a newer roof to be able to put that solar on, because the last thing you want to do is put it on there and have to redo the roof next year. There's a lot of cost then trying to do that.
If I could say, Jeff, real quick, the reason we chose Hamilton first is because we were doing an addition there. So we did a gym addition and 4 classrooms and a community room. And so what solar did for us there, putting it on that new addition, it recouped. In other words, it paid for the utility cost of the additional space that we added onto the building. And so our utilities didn't go up. Actually, they went down for that building, even with the addition, because of what we were able to do with solar.
Yeah, and we're doing,
Ask a question about so let's just say my bill at a elementary school is like, I think one of them is like $6,000 a month for electricity. If I just put solar on there in a perfect world, let's say I got it for free, what do you think my bill would go down? Is that a fair question?
yeah, that's hard because you don't, you got to know how much you're actually drawing. But I mean, we've seen anywhere, I want to say anywhere from 20 to 30% on our buildings. We've done 4. Like for instance, North Side is our geothermal building, so that is already saving so much. So that one is a little bit different, but like Hamilton, I know that one for sure we've saved over 30%, if not more, for cost. We're doing something also unique. We're doing an outdoor classroom with solar on a pergola, and it'll probably be either the first or second one that's out there, and it was funded, and we're really excited about that because we would also entail an EV charger also with that too. So yeah, we've got a lot of exciting stuff that's happened with solar.
Hey, can I jump in with a financial note here? School districts operate on revenue limits. That revenue limit is pretty tight. And for a while there, we had this thing called the energy efficiency exception to the revenue limit, which meant that if you had an energy project with a good payback, you could fund it on your tax levy and enjoy the payback. And it gave school districts some flexibility to do these types of projects. That was eliminated, I think, around 2017 or so. Governor Walker edited the thing so it effectively got like delayed for 1,000 years or something. I always thought that was a mistake as from a policy perspective. There were a few school districts who maybe were stretching the rules a little bit. I always felt like we should have just dealt with those as an exception instead of killing the whole thing. So the reason I mentioned that is if you really want to do major improvements, it's super important to either do them under new construction or major remodeling because you're not likely to get that many other chances at it.
No, and
the-
then I think then if you can include the cost in those things, you're right, Mike. That's kind of the approach we've taken, is looking at when we've replaced roofs or when we're doing major construction. That's why we chose Hamilton the very first time, is because we're doing this addition. Let's see if we can cover the utility costs, and we were able to do that plus some for that addition. So we know that will be a payback for the next 20 years where we're receiving that.
So can I ask a question that's the the devil's advocate here for kind of things that I've heard? So let's just say you have a roof leak and your roof looks kind of like this picture here. Do you have to pay a contractor to come out and like unplug the panels and move them aside and then plug them back in, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I know for us, the company we use, they would definitely come out, remove them so that there's no damage to the panel. There's inverters that would have to be removed and then some framework. All the framework that we've put on all of our schools is not anchored through the roof. It's got ballasts that sit on there. So it's an easy removal, but a little consuming how many panels you would have on the roof.
Sure. Electric cars. We had a couple staff members at our district office, actually quite a few that had gotten electric cars. There was an incentive a while back that was pretty wild. So the question was, is this like the way of the future? Should we start preparing for staff or students that have it? So I think for about $1,200, we got these little monitored charging stations outside of our district office. It was like a dual head thing. Really quickly, some community members got a little bit of a kerfuffle over it and didn't realize that we were charging people. So in order to use it, you would have to dial into their app and pay to play essentially. So we've just got a couple of them. We're getting our toes wet in case this becomes a major thing, but anybody else doing this or having any concerns with it?
Jeremiah, we have some at our district office, and I just want to note for people that are putting in EV chargers going forward, you can't charge for it. So
Can't?
the law changed that governmental entities can't charge for EV. I'm guessing that's to dissuade public entities from putting in EV chargers and leave it up to other people. But there was a change there, and there's an exercise tax and all that. My understanding is if you put it in before, you are still able to charge. We've been doing it wrong all along. We've been charging for the electrical use, which was illegal. But now that's, I guess, how they want you to do it for those that do it. So there's just some nuances there.
Brian, we appreciate you keeping Jeremiah out of jail. Thank you for that information.
Breaking news, I won't be on the next podcast.
Hey, can I ask a question with that? How much when people charge, because we're looking into this right now with our sustainability plan, putting them in schools, having them available for staff, but how much does it cost to charge a car? Do you know what those costs are?
For us, it's so nominal, I couldn't even detect it on a bill. So I very, very inexpensive. For us, it's maybe $10 a month, if that. So I think the
Okay.
upfront cost is probably the most to get the piece of equipment. But Brian, I don't know, have you guys done any analysis?
Yeah, since we were doing it illegally and charging for electrical use, we had someone from a nearby business using it like every day. And like Jeremiah said, I think it was like probably $10. Ours isn't used heavily. It's kind of used by that one user. So, I mean, they were being charged, under $1 every single day for having their car plugged in, because it just doesn't take a whole lot. And ours are level 2 chargers. We couldn't afford the level 3 chargers that are like $70,000 or $80,000. Those are the ones that charge cars in like 15 minutes.
We did put chargers in our school. We just built a brand new auto shop, so we're trying to embrace that. Maybe this is the future, so it's something that's going to be integrated in the curriculum. I'd say in related news, there's a school district that's gone all electric with their bus fleet, which is a crazy endeavor. So I don't know much about that if anybody else does.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question. Is there anybody, because of our sustainability plan that we're putting together and community members, they've pushed us to even all of our vehicles, not just busing. And so has anybody transitioned into electric trucks, electric vans and those things? We have not done that. We have not even looked into that, but there's community members who are encouraging us to do that.
We've looked at it, but our city does our maintenance on our vehicles, and it requires a whole different certification, and like there's a huge startup cost to maintain those vehicles. And right now the city hasn't moved that way. They probably will in a couple of years, and then we would be looking at it after that.
Yeah, thank you.
Use the chat if you know anything about examples of districts who've done these things.
Nice. This one's pretty basic. We can come back to the chat in a second here. This is just the watering piece. Like you can put a monitor on if you have an irrigation system that will run it only if the temperatures are right. So it's not, you're not just evaporating all of the water that's being sent out. And then secondly, wind. It should measure the wind because you can blow a lot of your water away from the fields too. So that's just a simple way to keep that under control. Nothing will bother a taxpayer more than driving past your school when it's raining and seeing your watering. So that's a good thing to have on tap too.
Yeah, that's a big one. We've had that happen. Our sprinkler systems right are on automatic, so we have timers on them. You want to watch that very carefully because not only does it waste water when you do that, but you're right. Taxpayers will definitely let you know.
Yeah.
That is great.
Excited to hear about geothermal. So for those doing or have been doing these projects, what is it? I don't even know if I understand what it is. And what's the maintenance on it? What is it saving? What does it do?
Yeah, so geothermal, we went to this in 2014 when we built our new school. And so first of all, you have to have a big upfront cost differentiates based on how deep is that water table that you're going to use. So we have an 87,000 square foot building that we built in 2014 that has 64 wells, approximately 300 feet deep. The upfront cost was less than we anticipated because we only had to go 300 feet to do that. We have our wells there underneath our parking lot. Some of them are underneath the existing building. We have not had any issues with them at all. You have heat pumps that you use with your geothermal. One of the things that I would advise, and one of the mistakes that we made, and we're looking at the new school that we're doing, we're going to probably go geothermal again, but we will do so with a centralized system as opposed to a heat pump for every classroom. One of the things that we did when we built the school is I was insistent, right, that we put these heat pumps in the hallways so that if we had to do maintenance on them, that we wouldn't interfere with schools. But they're very difficult to work on in the hallway and up in the ceiling. And so just little things like that, what we've learned, but I can tell you from a maintenance of standpoint, it's been a pretty good system for us. Your utility, your electric costs are going to go up with that. And that's why it's really nice to, if we can team that up with solar, like what we've been able to do. It took us several years later, 8 years later, to be able to do that. But from a sustainability standpoint, people like that because it's clean energy. And so it was very difficult making that decision at the beginning, not having a boiler at all. Because one of the things we did is we visited different schools, and some schools have a boiler backup. We chose not to do that. So we've had a few issues, glycol leaks, but nothing out of the norm. But we haven't spent a lot of money on our geothermal, but we will start having to replace some of those heat pumps now that they're over 10 years old. And so there's some costs there. But I think, again, if you went with a centralized system, but we've been very happy with what we've had. The community supported that. They've liked that too, but we've learned some things along the way. And I hope that's a short kind of introduction to geothermal.
What is it doing? So you're pulling hot water out of the earth and it's going through your boilers, or?
Yeah, so what you're saying is the temperature of the earth is approximately 54 degrees, right? So when you have to cool, you don't have to, you can control that. When you have to heat, you start from basically that temperature. And so you use that heating and cooling that saves you a little bit of money, but you're using the earth's surface to cool and heat your building. And so pulling that water through the system, in essence.
Fascinating.
Hey,
I
Jeremy.
don't know, Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to that geothermal, or anybody else?
Yeah, I would say that, one thing we learned with our 2014 school is that there's 71 heat pumps. And so our newer school, we would look at doing, larger heat pump that would do more classrooms. So we don't have so many. But everything you said, Joe, yeah, it's totally it's cost savings wise, it helps out for sure.
Yeah, one of the things you have to change filters on those too. And so again, I'd recommend if you're going to do the system, there's a little bit more upfront cost to do a centralized system through the air handler. And you can do that, and they exist. And everybody I've talked to, it's kind of a wash now, as opposed to putting individual heat pumps. And so that would be the one thing that we would do differently.
Hey, Jeremiah, in my role as timekeeper, we got about 8 minutes left this morning.
Well, Brian Adesso is going to talk for the next 20 minutes on the Inflation Reduction Act. So what is this, and how have you used it?
Yeah.
Now, the Inflation Reduction Act is something that's great, that's around right now. We'll see after the 20th here on how that's going to go. I know Andy's on the call here. He's used it. He's actually probably one of the first school districts in the state that have gotten a check actually back from the federal government. But for like solar projects, if it's under 1 megawatt, you'll get 30% back right now for whatever the price is for the install. And all the material and labor and all that. So it's a huge deal. If you've done any solar project last year or even in 23, you may want to look at about getting in for the Inflation Reduction Act to get that 30% back. Our project's much larger, so it requires prevailing wage and apprenticeship rules and It's super, super fun. But we're also looking at getting like $3.8 million back and maybe up to $5 million back from our project. So it'd be like a 5% savings on our whole overall project. Because our geothermal is going to link into our domestic hot water. It links into a refrigerator and freezer. We'll also not have natural gas in our building. So it's going to be we're told it's the largest net zero school in the nation once it's done and verified, and it'll be 23% bigger than the next one down. So it's kind of a big deal, I guess.
How big is that school going to be?
It's 222,430 square feet.
Wow. Okay.
2,743 solar panels.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, so it'll be a 1.14 megawatt solar array.
This is getting back to the basics a little bit here. Thank you for sharing on that. And I say that like really emphasizes the need of having a business manager that's into it as much as we are to be able to help us cross that path. I have never had luck writing a grant or going through that process, so appreciate all those that do. As far as chemicals and equipment, I think a lot of us are probably using scrubbers that are ionized, using chemicals that are more green. However, there's always the cautionary tale of like MRSA outbreaks or things where you need the more beefier chemicals. But anybody doing anything interesting with chemical stations or where they've taken this topic?
Yeah, I would say that we have not. We look at our chemicals, we identify them. I wouldn't say that they're certified green chemicals, but we're always looking. We don't use acid anymore. There's a lot of chemicals that we don't use bleach. There's certain chemicals we don't use, and we've identified those, but we haven't what I would call go green with that initiative yet. How about
Do you
you?
know? Yeah, just the more friendly levels of chemicals where we'll have
Yeah.
like a green chemical in the classroom for cleaning desks, but more of the disinfectant stuff on the custodial carts. I do know of a district, I believe, I want to say it's Kettle Moraine, that went to having stations that somehow create the chemical on site where you're not even having to buy it anymore. It's creating it through some sort of osmosis process, but I can't speak to it. But I think there's more pressure overall from parents and stuff to have more green chemicals.
Yeah.
Brings us to student engagement. I think I always get random emails from students saying like, hey, we should go solar, we should do this. There's composting. One of our schools had a community garden, which it still does. It's fantastic and it's run by students and parents. Anything else that you guys are doing to engage students?
Almost every one of our schools now has a garden that the students are a part of. We engaged our student staff right before COVID at the two high schools and started talking to them about composting at the high school level. We had to take a step back during COVID but we were ready to trial that. We're also looking at that now. But one of the things in our sustainability plan is we have a letter from students. They're not on our committee, but we do have a letter of support from students from that perspective. And so I would say this, any program that we do at the high school level definitely needs student engagement or it won't be successful. And so we've talked about that and ways to get them more involved.
Yeah, and I would add to that we have now started putting numerous greenhouses at our schools. In fact, we're looking at doing a newer one at Central High School for the engagement, and we've seen a lot of student engagement where they're growing different fruits to bring to the table, to the kitchen. That's been very helpful too. So
yeah, we just recently put in a greenhouse in at an elementary school, and it's amazing the things that these elementary school students are doing and been a part of, and they're a part of that whole design process. They're a part of. They're the ones who water the plants. They take care of the plants every day. They've really found and just did a presentation to the board this last week, but it's really helped with some issues as it relates to behavior issues in the district. We use that as kind of an offshoot, and kids were having problems and including them, and we've really seen some improvements in that area. But Jeff's right, we're starting to put greenhouses in almost all of our facilities, plans to.
Nice. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, I depend on you guys when we go to conferences or regional meetings just to understand this stuff, because I think things are emerging pretty quickly. Also, there's a lot of companies out there that can really help you through this. I'd throw a word of caution, though. A lot of times there's some promises that I just don't know can be kept. I had an assessment done of our natural gas and had a contractor say, or a vendor say, great news, I can save you $500,000 a year by switching to this system, doing XYZ. I was like, that's amazing, because our entire gas bill for the year is $330,000. So like, you're gonna be paying us to use your system? Like, so just crossing your T's and making sure that the data provided is good. Secondly, when you get in bed with some of these folks, you might get married to using them for any projects in the future. So if they do an assessment for you and you sign off on it, that may mean that you're tied to using them for any energy upgrades or updates in the future. And I've known it that a lot of districts have a hard time getting out of that agreement when they don't want to be in it. So any concluding thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, that's a good point. I just want to add, I've alluded to the sustainability committee that we started this last year and this climate action plan that we're putting together. All the data that we've gotten from that is stuff that we were already doing and monitoring. But I opened it up to you. I'm taking this to the board on the 27th. But after that, if anybody would like to see the draft of our plan and the process that we did, we'd be more than happy to work with you and share that with you once we take that to the board. But really it's been a lot of work, but it's been worth it. When the superintendent asked for this to happen, we wanted to be in charge of it because we kind of wanted to control what it looked like from a buildings perspective. And so we wanted to be a realistic program. And so we've done that, but we're willing to share that with people as we move forward.
Last, there is a couple of certifications you can get. Back in the day, Energy Star was a big thing. There's LEED certified when you're going through a referendum process to aim towards, and Green and Healthy Schools Initiative, which is very robust. I tried it once to apply for that as well.
I would just say that all of our schools are Energy Star, and believe it or not, even this one that was built in 1899. And so it's a great process to go through, at least selling it to the community.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right on. Well, that really brings us up to our time. We just wanted to get everybody primed up for our next session. Will be on March 13th. We're gonna be talking about asphalt and hardscape care and all the outside things. And hopefully by then the snow and cold is starting to make its way out. So look forward to that time with you guys.
And that'll be the week right after we have had the facilities conference. So hopefully we'll see everybody there.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Bye-bye.
take care.